First contact and invasion. The stars looked the same as they always had from Earth. No one knew that eyes were watching, measuring, and planning. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the International Space Station, gazing at the blue marble of Earth below. Her dark eyes reflected the planet's azure glow as she sipped her morning coffee. 20 years in space had taught her to appreciate these quiet moments. "Commander, we're picking up something unusual." Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through her earpiece. Multiple objects approaching Earth at incredible speed. Sarah's coffee floated from her hands as she rushed to the command module. The main screen showed dozens of objects decelerating as they approached Earth's atmosphere. "Is it debris?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Debris didn't decelerate. "No, ma'am. They're ships, and they're huge." Within hours, the vessels positioned themselves in geosynchronous orbit above every major city on Earth. Communications worldwide erupted in panic as governments scrambled to respond. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session as the world's militaries went on high alert. The first transmission came 24 hours later. "People of Earth, we are the Krell Dominion," announced a harsh, guttural voice over all communication channels worldwide. The screen showed a tall, bipedal being with slate-gray skin, 4 yellow eyes, and a jaw structure that seemed permanently locked in a grimace. "Your world has resources we require. Submit to our authority, and your transition to Krell sovereignty will be peaceful. Resist, and you will be conquered. You have 6 Earth hours to respond." "They can't be serious," General Williams said during the hastily assembled Defense Council meeting at the Pentagon. "We can't just surrender the planet." Sarah, called back to Earth for the emergency, studied the alien transmission again. Their technology is clearly advanced, but they're making the strategic error by telegraphing their intentions. They expect an immediate capitulation. "Or what?" asked the president. "What are we actually facing here?" Before anyone could answer, screens worldwide flickered with another Krell transmission. Supreme Commander Vexkar, as he introduced himself, didn't wait for Earth's response. "Your silence is noted. Preparations for conquest begin now." The first strikes hit military installations across the globe with surgical precision. Weapons unlike anything humans had ever seen vaporized aircraft carriers, missile silos, and command centers. Earth's retaliatory missiles exploded harmlessly against invisible shields surrounding the Krell vessels. Sarah watched from the Pentagon's underground bunker as humanity's defenses crumbled within hours. Advanced fighter jets were swatted from the sky like flies. Tank divisions melted under concentrated energy beams. The most sophisticated human weapons seemed primitive against Krell technology. "We can't win conventionally," Sarah told the surviving military leaders 3 days into the assault. Half the world's major cities were under Krell control, with alien ground forces establishing processing centers for human registration and labor assignment. "We need to change our approach." By the end of the first week, formal military resistance had collapsed. The Krell established their central command in what remained of Washington, D.C., with Supreme Commander Vexkar occupying the partially destroyed White House as his headquarters. "Begin Phase 2, Vexkar ordered his subordinates. "The humans' organized resistance has been broken. Implement resource extraction protocols and labor redistribution." Science Officer Meslar, responsible for analyzing human capabilities, approached cautiously. "Supreme Commander, our initial assessments of human adaptability may be flawed. Historical data suggests." "Your concerns are noted, Science Officer," Vexkar interrupted. "But their primitive technology could not stand against us. Their governments have fallen. Victory is complete." But it wasn't. In the Appalachian Mountains, Sarah Chen established the first resistance cell. Having escaped the Pentagon collapse, she gathered surviving military personnel, scientists, and civilians determined to fight back. "The Krell expected us to fight conventionally, and they were prepared for that," she told the assembled group in their mountain hideout. "They weren't prepared for what humans do best: adapt." Dr. Marcus Way, formerly of MIT, examined a piece of Krell equipment they'd salvaged from a downed scout ship. Their technology is advanced, but not incomprehensible. It's based on principles we understand, just developed further. Can we use any of it? Sarah asked. Wei nodded slowly. Perhaps. Their communication systems operate on quantum entanglement principles. If we can decrypt their protocols, we might be able to listen in on their transmissions. Sarah turned to the group. The Krell think they've won because they've defeated our armies and captured our cities. But humanity hasn't survived this long by giving up. We'll fight differently. We'll fight smarter. While Krell forces established processing centers in urban areas, remote regions remained largely unmonitored. Sarah's group made contact with other resistance cells forming worldwide. A network took shape, using old radio equipment and salvaged Krell technology to communicate. 3 months into the occupation, the resistance made its first significant move. A Krell supply convoy traveling through the Blue Ridge Mountains disappeared, then another in the Urals, then a third in the Andes. Impossible. Vexkar growled when informed of the losses. How can primitives be causing these disruptions? Supreme Commander, Mesler ventured, humans are demonstrating remarkable adaptability. They're learning our patrol patterns and exploiting gaps in our surveillance. Then change the patterns. Increase surveillance. But the Krell military operated on rigid protocols established over centuries of successful conquests. Their command structure wasn't designed for rapid tactical adjustments. Meanwhile, Dr. Wei made a breakthrough. I've identified a vulnerability in their armor, he told Sarah, pointing to a specific joint where different materials connected. Their body temperature regulation system is exposed here. A precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse could disrupt it. Sarah studied the diagrams. Can we weaponize this knowledge? We held up a modified human rifle. I've reconfigured this to emit a concentrated EMP burst. It won't work at a distance, but up close. The resistance began equipping fighters with the modified weapons. Small strike teams conducted hit-and-run attacks, disabling Krell soldiers and capturing their equipment before disappearing back into the wilderness. Science Officer Meslar compiled reports of increasing resistance activities. Supreme Commander, the humans are targeting specific vulnerabilities in our systems. They're learning, adapting, and sharing information between their resistance groups. Vexkar dismissed the concerns. They are merely delaying the inevitable. Accelerate the resource extraction. We will strip this planet and leave them nothing. But Meslar had studied human history. Sir, with respect, every species we've conquered before had a breaking point, a threshold of losses they wouldn't cross. Humans appear to operate differently. The more pressure we apply, the more creative their resistance becomes. As the 6th month of occupation began, Sarah's network had expanded to include thousands of fighters worldwide. Dr. Wei and his team had reverse-engineered several pieces of Krell technology, creating weapons that could penetrate Krell defenses. We're ready for the next phase, Sarah told her lieutenants as they gathered around a map showing Krell command centers. The Krell wanted a war, but we're going to give them a nightmare. The human response. 6 months into the Krell occupation, Earth looked radically different. Major cities had been transformed into processing centers, where humans were sorted for labor assignments. Massive extraction facilities drained resources at an alarming rate. The skies, once blue, now carried a perpetual gray tinge from Krell industrial operations. But in the shadows between Krell outposts, humanity was far from defeated. Sarah Chen looked out over her expanded base camp, now home to over 300 resistance fighters. Similar camps existed on every continent, connected by a network of salvaged Krell communication devices, reconfigured by Dr. Wei and his team. We've confirmed the intelligence, Lieutenant Dias reported during the morning briefing. The Krell are consolidating their regional command operations into 5 major hubs. They're adapting to our disruptions. Sarah nodded. They're finally learning, but they're still thinking like conquerors, not survivors. That's our advantage. The Resistance had evolved from simple hit-and-run attacks to sophisticated operations. Humans had always excelled at asymmetric warfare, and now they were applying those skills against an enemy that had never faced such tactics. Dr. Y entered the command tent, carrying a Krell communication device. "We've decrypted more of their tactical frequencies. Listen to this." He activated the device, and Supreme Commander Vexkar's harsh voice filled the room. "Cannot tolerate further disruptions. Sector commanders will be held personally responsible for resistance activities in their zones. Any commander failing to suppress human insurgency will face immediate replacement and disciplinary action." Y switched off the device. "They're fracturing. Vexkar is pressuring his commanders, who are pressuring their subordinates. They're creating internal conflicts." Sarah smiled grimly. "Excellent. Divided leadership is vulnerable leadership." She turned to the assembled group. "It's time for Operation Thunderclap." For weeks, resistance cells had been gathering intelligence on the 5 regional command centers. Unlike human military facilities, Krell command structures were identical regardless of location or terrain, a reflection of their rigid, standardized approach to conquest. "Their uniformity is their weakness," Sarah explained. "Once we know how to infiltrate one command center, we know how to infiltrate them all." The plan called for simultaneous strikes against all 5 command hubs, using knowledge gained from Dr. Wei's research into Krell systems. Teams of fighters, equipped with modified weapons and infiltration tools, would penetrate the facilities and plant disruptors in their power cores. On the night of the operation, Sarah led the team targeting the North American Command Center near the ruins of Chicago. They moved through the darkness, using a Krell device that Dr. Wei had modified to mask their heat signatures. "Remember," Sarah whispered as they approached the perimeter, "Krell visual acuity is poor in low light. They compensate with thermal imaging, which we're blocking. Move slowly and deliberately." The team navigated through the standardized security measures that Wei had mapped out. True to prediction, the facility's layout matched exactly what they had trained for. Inside the command center, they placed disruptors at key junction points. These devices, created by combining human ingenuity with salvaged Krell technology, would overload the facility's power grid and scramble their quantum communications. As they completed their mission and withdrew, similar teams across the globe did the same. At precisely 300 GMT, all 5 disruptors activated simultaneously. The effect was catastrophic for Krell operations. Their centralized command structure collapsed as communications failed. Regional commanders, unable to receive orders from Vexkar, faced autonomous resistance attacks without coordination. In his damaged White House headquarters, Supreme Commander Vexkar raged at his subordinates. How have these primitives done this?" Science Officer Meslar, who had been warning of human adaptability for months, spoke carefully. "Supreme Commander, the humans don't fight like any species we've encountered before. They don't follow our rules of engagement. They learn our patterns and exploit them. They take our technology and repurpose it." "Impossible." Vexkar slammed his fist on the table. "No conquered species has ever turned our technology against us. Because no conquered species has ever had the human capacity for adaptive thinking," Meslar explained. "They don't see technology as sacred or immutable. To them, it's simply a tool that can be modified, combined, or repurposed." The Thunderclap operation marked a turning point. Without centralized command, Krell forces became isolated and vulnerable. Resistance groups, now armed with modified Krell weapons, began systematically targeting occupation forces. Sarah's next move targeted the Krell's resource extraction operations. "They came here for our resources," she told her expanded command group. "Let's make those resources impossibly costly to obtain." Resistance teams sabotaged extraction facilities worldwide. They didn't need to destroy the facilities outright, just introduce enough inefficiencies and failures to make the operation increasingly unprofitable for the Krell. 9 months into the occupation, Supreme Commander Vexkar faced the first real failure of his long career. Resource quotas weren't being met. Casualties among Krell forces mounted daily. The occupation was becoming unsustainable. "Implement final protocol," he ordered, his 4 eyes narrowed in fury. "If we cannot have this world's resources, then no one shall. Prepare orbital bombardment." Science Officer Meslar was horrified. "Supreme Commander, that violates the fundamental principles of the Dominion. We conquer to acquire resources, not to destroy them. The principles have failed us on this world," Vexkar hissed. "These humans cannot be conquered by conventional means. They must be eradicated." But the Resistance was listening. Dr. Way's modified communication devices had penetrated the highest levels of Krell command. When Vexkar gave the bombardment order, Sarah heard it in real time. "They're desperate," she told her team. "Which means they'll make mistakes." Using the decrypted Krell protocols, the Resistance infiltrated the orbital command network. Dr. Way's team had spent months studying Krell ship systems. They couldn't take control of the vessels, but they could introduce subtle errors into the targeting systems. When Vexkar ordered the bombardment to begin, the Krell ships fired, but not at Earth's surface. Their weapons targeted each other, creating a cascade of destruction among the Krell fleet. Vexkar watched in horror as his ships erupted in flames across Earth's orbit. "What is happening? What have they done?" Meslar, who had come to respect human ingenuity, simply said, "They adapted, Supreme Commander, as I warned they would." With their orbital superiority shattered, the remaining Krell forces found themselves isolated and vulnerable. The Resistance, now a global army equipped with hybrid human-Krell technology, launched coordinated attacks against all remaining occupation forces. 1 year after the invasion began, Sarah Chen stood in the reclaimed ruins of the Pentagon as the last Krell ship departed Earth's atmosphere. They had come expecting an easy conquest of primitives. They left having experienced the full force of human determination and adaptability. "They wanted war," Sarah said, watching the ship disappear into the sky. "But we gave them a nightmare." In the aftermath, humanity began rebuilding with a new sense of unity and purpose. The Krell technology left behind accelerated Earth's development by centuries. Within decades, humans would venture to the stars themselves, carrying with them the hard-earned lesson of the Krell invasion. Never underestimate a species that thrives on adapting to adversity. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, the Krell Dominion added Earth to their list of prohibited worlds. Planets too dangerous to approach, inhabited by species too resilient to conquer. They had wanted a war, but the nightmare they received taught them that some battles aren't worth fighting, and some enemies never stop adapting until they win.